Yesterday I was reffing an under 10 soccer game, and whenever the ball would go out of bounds, not only would the parents chase it for the players, uh, but in one or two instances when there was going to be a free kick, the father would actually take the ball and place it on the field, walk on the field to where the free kick was supposed to, take place. And then on the other side, the coach, in a couple instances, would physically maneuver the player when they were taking a throw in. So on his own team, he was only physically manipulating his own players, but would grab the shoulders of his player and kind of move the player in the direction that he wanted the player to face when attempting the throw in. And so to me, this is just another indication of one, uh, our inability to allow players to make mistakes, our unwillingness to allow players to make mistakes, and two, our overenthusiasm as parents and coaches for our role in the players' learning. Players have to learn how to do these things for themselves, whether they're chase after balls, put the ball down to take a free kick, make a throw in, whatever the case may be. Um, but throughout games, the parents want to yell and scream, and oftentimes they're attempting to give instructions to players. They're giving feedback to players. Sometimes it's negative feedback, sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's instructive, sometimes those instructions are incorrect. Sometimes the instructions contradict what their coach is telling them to do. So there's many potential issues with the instructions in general, but simply the fact that they're giving them is also a problem. The players need to learn to do things for themselves rather than trying to react to what a voice on the sideline is telling them to do. Because then you end up, at worst, you have, this was 7-on-7, so you have seven players listening to seven different parents on the sideline doing seven different things and potentially ignoring their coach and what the coach is trying to get them to do. That's probably the worst case. But even less intrusive is simply interfering with the players learning from the environment that's in front of them. So rather than being able to play in a situation and try something and kind of learn through trial and error and see what happens. Instead, we're just taking these instructions, and one, we're probably going to react late if you have to rely on the instructions from the sideline to make a move. You're going to be a step late because you're processing too slowly, as opposed to reacting to whatever's in front of you. And two, then it's disturbing that learning process of learning about whatever that situation that's in front of you. And I understand that these parents, have their best intentions for their own children. They may or may not care about the other players on the team, but I know that they have the best intentions for their own son. But their approach is close to about the worst thing that they could be doing in that situation for their own son, for that player. Because they're taking away those learning opportunities, they're making their athletes reliant on the parent, and they're taking away the opportunity for these young players to make mistakes in inconsequential circumstances or environments where it's safe to make these mistakes, where nobody's going to remember, who made the mistake in an under-8 soccer game in, November when they're, 12, 13, 14 years old. But if they don't learn how to make mistakes and react to mistakes and adjust to mistakes and move on from mistakes at this age, and the players or the parents are doing everything they can to control from the sideline and do as Innovate FC on Twitter calls PlayStation coaching, and in this case PlayStation parenting from the sidelines, then how are they going to learn to perform these skills when the competition increases, and then how are they going to learn how to adjust and adapt and handle mistakes when the consequences get greater, whether that's potentially in a tournament championship game at this age or at higher levels of competition as they move on in their careers. Because if we protect them so much at this age group and then they don't develop these the resiliency or the adaptability to handle adverse circumstances, and then they move on to, more competitive situations where mistakes are inevitable and the parent probably can't be there to hold their hand through every possible situation. uh, they're not going to have the skills to deal with those situations and those mistakes. And potentially that's where, you see players at 12 or 13 years old that are crying because they don't know how to handle a mistake, or you see players yelling at each other in the middle of the game because they've never learned how to handle mistakes because their parents have, spent their whole childhoods trying to prevent mistakes and prevent their children from doing anything wrong, and in a lot of cases making excuses for their children. Uh, so again, I understand it's with best intentions, but those best intentions are actually creating negative outcomes for these children because they're interrupting the learning, and they're interrupting the process of developing better resiliency and grit and adaptability to be able to handle more adverse situations in their futures.